Got an Ahab! Woo-hoo-hoo! Yeah! Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, directed by Scott Glosserman, starring Nathan Baesel as Leslie Vernon, and the great Robert Englund as Doc Halloran, and also Scott Wilson as Eugene, and Angela Goethals as Taylor Gentry. Behind the Mask, folks, an extremely underrated gem of a horror film, in my opinion. In the vein of Scream, it's kind of a satirical look at the slasher genre. But it's very different from Scream in a lot of ways, but just in the sense that it is a satirical look at the slasher genre, Behind the Mask is as well. I think this movie gets a lot more into the cliches of the slasher film, very much so. It's just a hilarious take on, and then the third act, it really gets serious, once Leslie Vernon's plan comes together in the third act, things get really serious and intense. And that's one of the things I love about it. Like the first half, it's kind of lighthearted and fun and very hysterical. But things get serious once shit goes down. It gets rough. And so the film begins with we meet Leslie Vernon, and he's about to be interviewed by this young television journalist named Taylor Gentry. And she's got her own crew of cameramen, and what we find out that they're filming a documentary. And as we get to know Leslie Vernon a little bit, she shows up at his house, and he's got the typical scary house on the street with dilapidated. Looks like a haunted house, or somebody might have been killed in there. Every town has a street like that with one house that's creepy. It's definitely the typical scary house down the street, and that's where we meet Leslie Vernon. And don't think that that's a coincidence that his house looks like that, because he actually planned it that way. You know why? Because he's out of his freaking mind. And in this world, killers like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger actually exist in time. And so their crimes are legendary. They're the Jeffrey Dahmer like we have today, and John Wayne Gacy type figures that legendary in the crime world, and this man really worships them, and he wants to actually be them. So he decides he actually wants to be a serial killer in the vein of Michael Myers. And so what he does is he lays out this elaborate plan, and he actually wants the television crew to film it as his plan comes together. And it's very ingenious how he sets up. He sets his sights on a young girl who's a virgin, and he decides he wants her to be his final girl. And he sets up the scares. It's hilarious. He'll booby trap a door so it slams shut on behind her, and he'll have someone else drop a rock, so when he's standing behind the bush, she looks away because she heard the rock drop, and then he flees out. And it's like, oh my god, he's gone. It's just like the original Halloween. You see Michael Myers staring in through the window, and then next time you see it, he's gone. So it explores all those cliches of the slasher genre. It's hilarious. And we meet Leslie Vernon's best friend, and he's actually is a serial killer. So he becomes Leslie's mentor. And when we first meet Eugene, played by Scott Wilson from The Walking Dead fame, it's hilarious. You see him, he's buried 6 feet underground in a coffin. And they're like, oh my god, he's been out there for 3 days. They dig him up. And it's just him testing himself to make sure he can endure being buried underground. And it's hilarious when you meet his wife, you find out that she was actually one of his final girls. And when Taylor Gentry, the reporter, asked her, how come you stay with this man when he's a psychotic murderer? And she's like, well, I tried to get away, but he wouldn't let me. it's hilarious. It's just a genius movie, and the performances are so great and so funny. And Angela Goethals plays Taylor Gentry so great. And as the plot develops, once Leslie Vernon finds the girl that he wants to be his final girl, he even sets up a fake backstory, saying that he like drowned in a river when he was a kid and he got abused by his parents, and he sets it up so when he actually follows the girl to the library, and the librarian, played by Zelda Rubinstein from Poltergeist fame, she tells the whole backstory of Leslie Vernon, because it was actually an old legend in town. They actually know the story. So Zelda tells the story in a little creepy, typical horror movie way. And so the young girl is frightened. It's like, oh my God. So Leslie Vernon puts together this fake news article with this fake picture. And Taylor asks him, like, oh wow, look at this picture. And he's like, that's CGI. So he sets up the microfiche, so that when she sits down, that's the first thing she sees is this article about Leslie Vernon and how he was a murderer, and he was abused as a child, and he supposedly drowned in the river. So as the plot develops, Leslie Vernon decides he wants to lead these young group of children, the final girl and his friends, and her friends, and to this old abandoned house. And he wants to pick them off one by one, just like you see Freddy or Michael Myers or Jason. And he even places where the weapons will be, so as the plots happens, he can grab an axe, and the head will fall off when the girl tries to swing it at him. It's so funny. He sets up all these little plot devices, and it's just hilarious the way they do it. And I gotta say that this is my favorite Robert Englund performance outside the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I love him as Doc Halloran, and when I see him, he's such the typical, the typical Ahab type character, and he's very much based on, obviously, Dr. Loomis in the Halloween franchise. And I really liked his performance so much that I would like to see him play Dr. Loomis in the new Halloween. So, folks, if you're looking to make a new Halloween, cast Robert Englund as Dr. Loomis, baby, because he's awesome in Behind the Mask. I love his performance. And everybody in the film is just excellent, hilarious, just brilliant. Nathan Baesel, I don't know why we haven't seen more of him, because he does a great job in the film, as well as Angela Goethals and everyone in the cast. Bright young cast and I'm still waiting for the sequel, folks. Where is it? I've heard about it. I've heard talk about it maybe being a prequel or a sequel. Who knows? But do it. Get on it, people. So as the events all comes together, everything plays out perfectly according to Leslie Vernon's plan. Except the one thing that he didn't count on, and that's the fact that this young girl he's following and stalking isn't a virgin. So that foils his plans, and we find out Taylor Gentry is really conflicted because she actually connects with Leslie Vernon, and she actually starts to like him. But then when she realizes, okay, he really is a murderer. He's not just some funny, goofy, horror-obsessed weirdo. He's a murderer and psychopath, and he wants to kill people. And you see that once Leslie catches up with one of the cameramen in Taylor's crew, and the guy's like, "Oh man, Leslie, what are you doing? I thought we were friends." And he takes Leslie Vernon's mask off, and you see this blank stare. There's nothing there. He's gone. You know, it's just like Michael Myers, or one of the psychotic maniacs from all the slasher movies in the '80s. And you realize, oh shit, it's on. This isn't a joke anymore. And that's when things get really serious, and that's when the horror part comes in and gets really intense and really scary even. And we find out that the final girl is not who we thought it is. But there is a final girl, but I'm not going to give that away, because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. But you guys absolutely have to see this film. It's brilliant. It's a comic gem. It's so underrated. It's amazing. So please go see Behind the Mask. Buy it at any cost. Behind the Mask, directed by Scott Glosserman, starring Nathan Baesel, Robert Englund, Scott Wilson, and Angela Goethals. Behind the Mask, the Rise of Leslie Vernon. And thank you for joining me, folks, in the horror corner. Tune in and stay scared.